All right, call to order at 7:06. Roll call. Mike has an excused absence. And let's see, we have a Richard and Lori. So we're good. Are we missing? Sonia is running late. So we will see her soon. Go ahead and the adoption, move to adopt. Do we have a motion to adopt the agenda?
I
So
move
good.
to
Go ahead.
I move to adopt the agenda.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you.
Aye.
Thanks, Steve. All right, anybody have any announcements today?
No. I think ballots are starting to arrive. Not really long range planning, but that's always exciting.
Did you all get your ballots? I got mine.
Yep, we
I
got
haven't
ours.
checked my mail.
It's
Yeah,
still sitting on the table, but we got ours.
'tis the season, right? All
Well, it
right,
has a lot of information in it on our strategic planning stuff. So,
Right.
and I got some emails, at least the board did, thanking from community members, thanking us for including that type of information and working on that type of stuff. So pass that on to all of you guys, because you guys are a big part of that as well.
Fabulous. All right. All right, so no announcements, no minutes at the moment here. The continuing business and finalizing our 2021 annual survey. And I know that we haven't had as much time to review these documents as normal, but have you all had a chance to take a peek at those survey questions that AJ had sent along to us?
Share here so
Yeah.
people can see. I think the main things that we was these questions along this side here, and then in this region last year we had the GM questions, but doesn't exactly seem totally pertinent for this year at this point in time. So the rest of it was kind of all made to be kind of standardized from year to year, and allows us to kind of track those, satisfactions with, the needs and everything, and do some of that gap analysis for our various amenities and facilities and that type of thing.
I thought it was very thorough. It's not long, it's nice and short and well written. And I think that's going to be a positive thing for people to just take a few minutes to fill it out and get it back in.
Yeah, I think we'll obviously work with Josh to, get it all formatted and stuff like that for any paper copies that we do at the admin office. And then John will help us with administering it through SurveyMonkey again. Kind of the thought process that I had was, last year we did the random sampling mailing, and part of that was just kind of vet whether we were, by sampling the entire community and then doing an online survey for the first time, it was to kind of maybe corroborate that we were reaching the entire, subsect of the community, not just like a certain online portion of the community necessarily. And I think for the most part, the results were very much in line. There was like a couple questions that were like, kind of hot topics on social media that, tended to trend a little bit differently on the online survey, but that was about it. I think the main
Go ahead.
thing would be like kind of these questions and finalizing any language on those questions. And if there was any other types of questions that we, thought might be pertinent to ask. Part of it was, trying to elaborate a little bit further on some of our capital planning and strategic planning stuff that we discussed, and everything like that. And so we had some stuff in the capital planning for like the ice barn. And so trying to gauge, what sort of uses the community would like to see in there and start to kind of, gather that information. We talked a lot about trail system and strategic planning and that stuff. And so, I came up with the question of, would we want such a connected trail system to be multi-use, or not? Basically, would we want to allow biking and hiking / walking on that trail? With the thought process that would be largely a means of the community to be able to get from point A to point B, as opposed to like, hiking trails that we currently kind of have get you to like to a waterfall or this, or around Lake Louise. But this system would be more in line with like, we're going to get gate 5 people down to the marina or the rec corridor, and gate 1 and 2 people out towards, entrances towards the lake or lookout area, or Galbraith, or the logging roads up into Galbraith.
Forget Stimson. Or maybe we shouldn't let that out.
Yeah. We do have some connections into Stimson. Obviously a connection into Stimson couldn't be multi-use because Stimson doesn't allow bikes.
Well, and I was
Don't bring your dog either.
Yeah, I know. We walked it in our short time without a dog. We walked it a whole bunch, and it was great. But now it's like we can't go there. Should help or at all. AJ, I was thinking too. I mean, and maybe this is adding a cop-out answer to question 25. But I mean, I guess maybe one should be like, should we have both too, or look at a trail system that incorporates both and accomplishes both, but has some legs that are pedestrian only and some legs that are multi-use, just to allow pedestrians that, that want to, like Lake Louise Trail. We have that as there's no bikes allowed on Lake Louise Trail. And it's probably a great thing that it's not, because it's a lot of people walk it and they walk it at their own pace. And there's plenty of other trails that have bike use on it. And,
Okay. I think we could probably come up with some wording, just adjust the question a bit or add another answer to be able to accommodate that sense of, I don't know the word I'm looking for. I'm drawing a blank here, but
I don't know. The more I thought about it, I'm like, well, are we just adding like do we want a definite answer, or do we want a maybe?
Yeah, and I had kind of envisioned like an interurban type trail, or like something similar to like what's around Lake Louise, that is wide enough and big enough, and has grades that are appropriate for, all kind of ability levels and stuff like that. Just going off of that question in particular, the board at our last meeting did approve me putting out an RFQ for an engineering firm to help us update our roads and drainage capital plan. But as part of that, I included a pedestrian component to that, to start to investigate sidewalk alternatives, and this topic in particular. So this question in particular will help facilitate that, engineers, planning and design and research of like, what we would want to build, because something that needs bikes or can handle biking and walking will obviously need to be wider and have different grades than what like a more primitive hiking trail would be. And I think the hiking trails have been kind of the focus so far of, most of our efforts of trail building and maintenance and stuff and what we have kind of existing. But I know Lori has, mentioned, having facilities like that are, good for all the different, generations that we have living here, from retired people on down to little kids and families and stuff like that. And so being able to provide, and then we obviously all hear about connectivity and the lack of sidewalks. And so this is, to some extent, these trails may go through green space. They may connect up to a road and then be adjacent to a road for a bit before they get back to a green space and then go back, and kind of, there's not green space necessarily to connect every last place to every last place. So we might have to get a little creative with how the space gets utilized. But yeah,
I think that's excellent.
I think we could come up with some way to word that.
Yeah, I see exactly what you're talking about now, more of as too, as a multi-use. Yeah, the reasoning.
Yeah. I mean, that was kind of where I was coming from, but I think, on top of that, we could also just incorporate, offshoot hiking trails and stuff off of that, to get us to other places. You might be able to get this biking and hiking trail to one place, but then you could create another connection to a different road, but maybe it's not suitable for like, grade wise, and it may need to be more of a primitive trail or something like that. Because we do have a lot of grade changes and elevation changes out here. So, the reality is that the type of trail connecting all the different gates is going to have to be, they're going to have to look at all that stuff, topography, where the green spaces are, where some of those like kind of keyways come out between homes and stuff, to get to green spaces and things like that.
Yeah, I think that's great, especially in the direction that I feel like the demographics out in the valley are going, and just the mindset of what people want to do these days.
It would be good maybe to nail down those, and as Adam was saying, is like, do we want biking, walking, or both, right? If there was a way maybe to ask another question, perhaps we could form another question. And I'm thinking that, we're going to have our regularly scheduled meeting at the end of the month as well. So we can kind of go over the survey again. Does that make sense, everybody? And what are we looking at in terms of sending this out, AJ? Are we thinking about?
I was thinking this would be, we would kind of get our thoughts finalized up here tonight, and we would send this to the board at the next meeting, get their thoughts and feedback, and then work with John on getting it out here, shortly after that next board meeting, so that we can, have it kind of ready for, shortly after the AGM or something about there.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I would say that designing and planning and constructing would use this trail system to be multi-use, biking, walking. And then, so no would be, it's single use, but does no mean walking or biking? You know what I mean? So that would be, that's the question
true.
I think we need to answer, so that's the.
I will admit I'm not very good at writing these types of questions. So I just kind of threw that together, but I think we can wordsmith and kind of tweak some of that stuff.
Good question. We just need to nail it down a little bit. One other thing I wanted to mention is that hot button issue kind of lately this summer with all the building and stuff. Would you support the board of directors spending time to create a plan to restart the density reduction program? Are most residents going to know what that is? Do we think? What do you all think?
that was something I went back and forth with as I kind of wrote that question after our last board meeting where we talked with Kevin a little bit
Mhm.
about that. And, I couldn't come up with a way to explain what density reduction was in a short enough thing to put on a survey. And so I was kind of battling with that in my own head as I wrote that question. I wasn't sure how to phrase it. But yeah, density reduction was done quite a while ago. And so, a lot with how much lots turn over and homes turn over here, a lot of people may have no idea what it is unless they've done research. So we may need to try to come up with some way to phrase that question that maybe doesn't call it density reduction and just elaborates on what it is, what density reduction is. Like, would you support the board of directors spending time to create a plan to collaborate or coordinate with outside agencies to purchase and, remove lots from the tax rolls for the purposes of density reduction in the neighborhood or something along those lines. That's just me spitballing off the top of my head at this moment.
Yeah, no, that gets to the issue, I think, just a little more explanation about that, what's going to happen with density reduction. I think would be good if residents were to know that density reduction means taking these lots off of our rolls, so they're not going to be, we won't be collecting dues on them, but there'll be green space. But my thought was, yeah, if it's possible to give the landowners, the homeowners, the ability, the landowners, right, the lot owners, the ability to sell their lot to an entity like the city of Bellingham, who would turn it, would keep it as green space, or some other entity, giving them that option would be a useful thing in terms of density reduction. I know a lot of people are concerned about it, so definitely something important to have on the survey. So I think if you all were to give it, instead of like haggling over it this evening, if anybody has a really good thought about it, wordsmithing this language, if we could do that over email before the next board meeting, or
Yeah.
we could certainly do it, and if you guys would give us the ability to do it, or if anybody else wants to work on that with us, that would be fabulous. And meaning Sonia and I and AJ perhaps, or anybody else who wants to be part of the group to do a little wordsmithing on those couple questions. Would that make sense?
Yeah, I kind of
Does that make
thought
sense, AJ?
the big thing would be just, do people support the general idea of these questions, or the concept of these questions are asking about? And then do we feel like we're missing anything important, like, from a idea like perspective for another question, or something like that? Like, are we missing a concept that would be pertinent to ask the community at this point, or anything like that? And I think yeah, that's.
Somebody else want to say something? I can't see everybody right now, but yeah, I think that it hits everything with those caveats, those two questions that maybe we need to wordsmith a bit.
Where did mini golf course come from? And I'm only saying one that would be kind of cool. Under 24. I was just
that's a good question.
I think it came from staff. Talking with, it wasn't from Darren, our maintenance manager. I think it was someone else. It might have been Michelle in our parks. I can't remember offhand, but I know Darren had mentioned it to us when we were communicating with him about the ice barn and having some contractors out there take a look at the barn itself and stuff. And we thought it was a pretty good idea. Obviously we got the golf course, and so, and if it's covered and indoors, it would, not require, a ton of maintenance and stuff necessarily. And whereas if we put it outside and stuff, then it's constantly getting rained on and debris falling on it and everything.
Like, right
I mean, it'd be
now.
awesome to have like, a putt course in a brew pub.
Well, they just got one of those in town in Bellingham, right?
Yeah, I think that flat stick is like that, isn't it? Down where
Yeah.
your pizza used to be.
Yep. I haven't been
But,
okay, that makes
we
sense. I was
already
just
got
curious
a whole.
because, we had just a couple, general things we could have in there, and then a very definite like activity. So I was just curious the history behind the very definite activity.
Yeah, and the farmers markets and flea markets, stuff came from staff as well.
Given the environment,
Talking with Sam and the rec program, and Darren had mentioned we could put, when we renovate the barn, you could put like multiple big rolling garage doors, so like they could all just go up, for an event like a farmer's market or something. People can bring their stuff in easily. Then it's kind of more of an open air space, kind of thing. There was discussion on whether or not, and this, some of the stuff would have to be looked into a bit more on the feasibility, once the barn is renovated, but like redoing the ice rink probably is not possible or cost effective, but maybe we could look into like some sort of artificial ice sheet that could go down for part of the year or something like that, so you could still have that function of skating. It wouldn't be the exact same as, what it used to be, but it would be kind of getting back to what that barn was used for.
Yeah, given the environment that we live in, and how it's like half the year, having space that we can use
Right.
that much to do community oriented stuff is good, because I feel like there's a drive to do more of that.
I thought that was an excellent question. When I read it, I just thought so many people would be interested in it, and help, the young, and, youngsters can go in there, and it just seemed like an outstanding question.
Yeah, I think it'd be great to have a covered recreation space just because of our weather here, providing that ability to, get out of the rain. And I think it was the last flea market, or it was one of the events that Rec put on recently. They had to move it to the barn because the weekend forecast was so terrible, and so we could avoid those types of last second pivots and whatnot, by having a space like that for those types of events. And then,
I believe it was a flea market, wasn't it? A couple of weeks.
I think it was the flea market. Yeah. And then the clubhouse admin building question is, we have some repairs to do in that clubhouse. And so, we have some plumbing repairs and things like that to get done. And so having an idea of, where people stand on that type of project. I think it was 2016 or so where they did kind of a substantial renovation to the exterior of that building. But there's obviously a significant amount of kind of wasted space in that building as well that could be better utilized, and everything like that. And
it would be nice to see that.
so,
I mean, just the tour I got during that, when we did we're doing the strategic planning sessions, the impression I got, and I don't go through there often, but was kind of inconsistency too, of just, anyway, it felt kind of, it definitely felt like it was like, this area is maybe fixed up at this time and this time. You didn't even feel like you were walking through the same building sometimes.
yeah, it's definitely a bit random all over the place, especially when you start entering the offices and stuff too. It gets even more random.
But yeah, it just seems, and it seems like a lot of it's, just better. Yeah, I think like what you have there is better utilization and almost little things that just to make it more consistent and better.
Yeah. Does anybody feel like there's any questions we're not asking, or we think, there's important things that we maybe want to try to, the part of the goal was not to create we still obviously have a pretty significant capital program for next year, that piggybacks off last year's survey. We don't want to necessarily get too far ahead of ourselves. So a lot of this thought process is kind of trying to gather follow-up questions or further define some of the stuff we're already kind of working towards. But, if there's any other pertinent questions people feel like, if someone has like a topic or something, then we can work on kind of writing a question for that.
Richard?
Last year's as well. So it looks like to me that we're 8 questions lighter than we were last year, which a couple of those are the GM ones, right?
Yeah.
So the other ones, what what was the process of elimination? So for an example, I think the one I pulled out here is from last year's question 30 was, when the rec special assessment ends in 2023, to what extent do you suppose the following fund expenses, etc. Now, looking at the results of that, it seemed a little hairy in terms of, apart from nobody wanting it to continue, and spending money, there's not really, at least for me, it wasn't a direct, this is what we do. So, and for example, is there a follow-up question there? And I guess just to kind of backtrack, so the finding out the questions we eliminated and making sure that we've got the follow-up questions, because I remember that survey being quite quick as well, I thought, and so I don't think that the 8 questions is a deal breaker, so to speak, but maybe I'm off track here.
Yeah, that's a good point. We could definitely, let me see here. If we have that stuff, can pull that up maybe quickly. Thought it was in here, but maybe it's not.
Yeah, I just pulled up your emails from before to find it.
I was gonna look for the last year's survey and try and share that. Let me see if I can find it quick. Oh, I have too many emails. Of course, it's pulling up drafts, not the final one.
Have an example of the report, but not the actual questions. Let's see.
Yeah, I have it in my computer here. Now I have it somewhere.
What the report works? The report states the question.
The report has the questions. Yeah, the report does include the questions here, so that might.
It's just
Your question was about the special assessment, Richard?
that was an example, but we're 8 questions lighter than we were last year. And I'm
Yeah,
understanding the
yeah, that's
GM
a good-
question. But so I just want to make sure that either we got the information that was needed, or how are we just taking like, well, last year we don't want to ask the same thing
It's a good
again.
question, Richard, for sure. Yeah,
All right, so this was our form from last year. I think we had, wow, is this really blurry or is it just me?
It's blurry.
Is that better?
blurry.
Yes.
You better, yeah. The bigger you can make it,
No
the better.
blurry. A little.
You can
There.
actually slide your screen a bit too, to this. Yeah, there you go.
So these were the main, I think 23 through 27 were kind of the main planning questions. I think we have, wondering, so yeah, it was rec specialists. When the rec specialist assessment ends in 2023, to what extent do you support or oppose the following fund expenses currently included in the assessment? So we could try to ask a follow-up question on that, to try to give the board for next year some additional data to work with as they plan the 2023 budget, because that's going to be kind of a crucial part of planning that budget is, how much can you adjust things and whatnot.
It seems like, Richard, that some of these questions, like 27, isn't included in the new one either. The trail issue. We do include trails, but we're talking about use now rather than the actual existence of trails, right? That's a shift too, I think.
Yeah. I think a lot of people in that question on trails supported sidewalk alternatives and, the multi-use paths. And obviously we're, always kind of working towards improving quality of our amenities and things like that. That's always a goal. Don't think the fitness trail was a very big hit in the survey. But I think the rest of it was fairly well supported. I think as far as the community center dance barn, I think we got pretty good data on that one for moving forward with, renovating and preserving that dance barn. I don't know that there's, anything else we need to really ask on that question. I had kind of thought like we could ask, like what color would you want to see it or something like that, but we probably need to determine like who we're working with on that stuff before we'd ask like a question like that, because each builder may offer like different colors or things like that, and whatnot.
Hey, Jim, looking at these results here, that I have up with trails, yeah, it looks like strongly support and somewhat support. It was about 80% supported improved trail quality, create bike paths, another 70% multi-use trails, 70% reported that they wanted that, those types of trails. And yeah.
Maybe we don't even need to ask the multi-use question on a trail system.
I think it kind of nails it down though, maybe. I think, what do you all think? I mean, I think it does sort of nail down the idea of like, because I know it's always an issue, right? Mountain bikers, and we had an exchange between a mountain biker and an angry exchange between a mountain biker and a hiker on one of the trails in Bellingham this year, where the mountain biker ended up getting stabbed by a hiker. And so there's some always some tension there, right, between bikers and walkers. And I don't know if that would, I mean, it's not necessarily mountain biking that we'd be doing from place to place, from gate 9 to gate 13 or whatever we might be doing, but it's, it's a tension. I like your idea though of the interurban trail, AJ, where people walk and bike and there's plenty of room to do both. I don't know if that can happen in most of the trails that we'd be working.
I think, signage is going to be important if we're going to go, that too. And just, having been a mountain biker and a hiker, and from what I can remember, when dealing with horseback riders too, mountain bikers are pretty much slowest on the pyramid. So they dismount for everyone, is because nobody messes with a horse, essentially, because you give the horse right of way. We probably aren't going to be dealing with horses, so that's good. And hikers are kind of the ones that can get hurt the easiest by either the mountain biker or the horse, and the mountain bike has generally the time and should have the ability to dismount for a hiker.
Sure.
And unfortunately, some hikers take it way too personally, and they don't opt for, I've seen the issues, and a lot of times it's not the mountain biker, but
you definitely can see, hikers walking with a child or something like that, or any hiker, right? Should feel safe, right? Walking from place to place for sure, so that's an issue.
I was looking at the way question 17's, worded though, it does. I'd be curious to see how, if any of those have improved, or I don't know if they can improve. They all are pretty, obviously pretty strongly supported, but are we talking about that we're taking 27 out in lieu of the other questions in there? All right. I guess Richard was talking about how we're about 8 questions less than what we were, and so we're so it just seems like we can't get quite a bit of information out of 27.
Are we that many less? Because the Word doc's got 33, and then this one has 33 as well. But is that
my Word doc? I got 33, and then I got 38 on the other one. But I think that was the report, so maybe that's what the problem was.
I mean, I think we could do, I think it would be good to know whether, the community wants to see like the connected trail system be like kind of that interurban style trail or not. I think it seems fairly obvious that a lot of the community supports trails and just in general as a whole. So trying to hammer down that connected trail system, because as we, once we build that connected trail system that actually, we have this like kind of disjointed trail system right now that has like little offshoots here. Then there's some substantial connection through certain areas. And then there's like just randomness, in certain places too. So like, as we planned a connected trail that weaves its way through the community, it'll also help us connect some of the disjointed stuff that maybe we have now, or then we can figure out ways to plan how to connect some of that disjointed stuff up to, a network as a whole. And then
it's kind of interesting, guys, that folks, in Lookout, if y'all, I'm sure you've all been up there, a lot of you have been up there, but there's a couple walking trails and there's a biking / multi-use trail as well. The one trail that leads to Road 4000 to the backside of Galbraith, to Cougar Ridge and those places is a multi-use trail. And then there's other parts of that trail that are simply walking trails. So that might be a consideration as well, somehow to separate the walking versus to the right in the riding.
I can kind of envision too that, just along with what AJ was saying, that having, different spine trails that are kind of maybe the main multi-use trail, and they're, So, and we'll, look for locations that are obviously more favorable grades and get, from point A to point B as we need them to. And then from those, there'll either be, connections. Some will be maybe to allow people to access them from their neighborhoods on their bikes or walk their bikes down in. But yeah, just, considering, kind of the access into the, for the, and I'm just kind of thinking of like a river, or tree style where you have different branches coming in, and some of them may not be, bike oriented, they'll be pedestrian oriented or vice versa. I mean, in Galbraith, they have trails that are pretty much not pedestrian oriented at all. And I don't know if we'll, I know of some, road trails out in the valley that are probably like that, but, I mean, that's, I think some of we'll all work together pretty well as we move along. And I can see kind of the importance of just each, I don't know if each gate or each region of Sun Valley having one of those big spine trails that's going to be multi-use coming together to join the other trail network that you can get. If you wanted to ride your bike up to the top of Gate 5 on a trail, you could, or
Well, you really can.
Ride down to Gate, from Gate 5 all the way down to the marina. Staying mostly on trails, you could.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I
I mean, right now you
if-
can get down to the market, which is fabulous, but yeah.
I wonder if a follow-up question on this 26 with the rec special assessment and really trying to question on whether people would support user fees or not, really trying to determine if that's something the community supports or, if they want to keep it just included in, our normal dues. 'Cause I think that the large majority of the responses to 26 were the kind of these bottom two, keeping that increase, as part of our normal dues amount, or, including it in the base dues with no increase, once the special assessment goes away, and figuring out how to adjust the budget accordingly.
Yeah, the one for that got the most support was including base dues, no increase to adjust budget elsewhere, 30%, almost 31. Saying that the fund with fees paid by users was 29%. There are two quite low.
Just as I think what we've just kind of finished the budget season, or I mean, is that from those of you that have had involvement with the budget, is that a feasible option?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely adjustments that could be made. Having, one thing that we found with the budget is we have all these weird boxes around money that don't really allow it to be like adjusted accordingly. Like, for example, the 2016, dues increase for the culvert vegetation control is like, you have all these, that's all capital funds, and it's for, paying salaries and like doing what is considered mostly operations type work or whatever, things like that. So, I think there's definitely adjustments that you could make. That rec special assessment puts boxes around that money, so it can't be used anywhere else if it was, better allocated to something else, or, or anything like that. So
I mean, didn't that, however much that was, get moved into the operations budget?
I mean, we didn't really plan that out. We just showed it like staying there, right? But next year's board's gonna have to actually like put together the plan for that. You know, we're really just looking at this next year 2022's budget, you know, and then we show projection moving out from there, you know, but we're not actually like planning out the 2023 budget at that point in time. You know, so that's going to have to be evaluated. You know, obviously we're bringing in, you know, a new GM and stuff, so we'll have to work with them, you know, as we develop the budget next year for that type of thing.
It seemed like the overwhelming survey participant, it was fairly overwhelming that people didn't want base dues to be raised and find the money elsewhere, 56% as opposed to 30%, and then approximately 20% didn't know. Or no, let's see. Yeah, 56% either strongly supported 40% to somewhat supported 16%, to 30%, and then 12% didn't know. So including base dues, no increase, adjust budget elsewhere. Fund with use fees is approximately 53% though, with 33% opposing or strongly opposing.
So I mean, I guess, I mean, sorry, this is a. I was wondering why speaker was on my head. If we've said that we don't want it increased, but haven't we just permanently increased it by not, because it's not essentially going back to the membership, it's just going to move into operations, which is then essentially a permanent just stay of execution. Is that right?
No, I mean, we have next year's board will have to make that proposal to the membership. This year, we just showed it for the planning, you know, the projection moving forward as it being in that, you know, base dues or whatever. But it's like it's not something that this year's board gets to decide, basically, as what it proposes to the membership. So, you know, and because it goes through like half of next year, you know, it's like, how do you show that necessarily? So, you know, I think that's part of it.
Yeah, so that data is, last year's data is really good for next year's board.
Yeah, that was part of it. We knew we were going to have to start, you know, formulating, you know, ways to make that work or whatever, depending upon what people supported. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't think, you know, I mean, there's a couple questions on here related to COVID, you know, like 22, how that, you know, COVID impacted your family. That's probably, you know, we could still ask those same kind of questions, or that same kind of question. Because obviously COVID has not gone away since last year's survey, but things are dramatically more open back up than what they were when we put this survey out. This thing just gets blurrier. I don't know. Must just be the PDF. But yeah, we did take this section out on the general manager, which was a couple questions. That's like 3 questions. So that's partly where we lost some of those questions that Richard was talking about.
So it might be worth to try and add something that's not just a question. Because like I see, we've got questions with the board, for example, encourages member participation, right, etc. So even if we get like a no, for example, unless people write into the comments, we don't really know why, right? So I guess what I'm saying is, unless I'm missing it, is there a way maybe to ask around possible barriers to assisting, whether it's, you know, time, capacity, the virtual component in person? I know that's been something talked about too, of the accessibility of, you know, helping out. I guess, I don't know, I guess some of them getting into essentially a little bit more of the weeds outside of just the satisfaction piece that we ask, if we have a couple of questions to spare. You know, if, for example, if people say, no, I don't think the board encourages member participation, well, we don't really know why. Right? Is it because of accessibility, time, commitment? Don't think it'll change, you know, ever, but then maybe we're opening Pandora's box there.
Yeah, I mean, I think somewhat the thought process was the question 9, like, is there anything you would like to add, was just like a way to like elaborate on some of that. Because otherwise, yeah, you could get into like a follow-up question for each one of these little lines, and now
yeah, you could. Well, I guess from, and what I'm hearing or seeing is, you know, that are all committees fully functioning? Are we packed to the gills with folks? It doesn't seem like it. So, you know, I see that that's we're pretty paramount. It's of paramount importance to be run with folks and welcoming, you know, diverse perspectives. So I'd say that's probably a more important one that I would, you know, want to know of, you know, if this, how could we increase that membership buy-in and engagement, etc. But, you know, maybe that's just me. Otherwise, I think it's fine.
I think that's a good point, though, Richard. I'm not sure if we want to include that on this year's survey, but it would be nice to know if people had ideas, or if they don't feel like they're included. You know, I'd certainly like to know as a board member, you know, why they feel that way.
Not to, sorry, I'm extra chatty right now, but it's, for example, like I'm recruiting board members and executive members for our for residential hall associations, National Residential Hall Honorary at the university, and a big turnoff for at least the student body is that even the boards themselves that are volunteer, which are really designed just to be feedback groups, they're turned off because of the jargon in position descriptions. But we write them like that so that people have something to put on their resume and feel that it is worth the time. But really then what we've heard is, well, I just want to come and give my perspective, or, you know, put on a karaoke night. I don't want to get into the Constitution and the nitty gritty of revamping, you know, the whole kind of Magna Carta, if you like. So I wonder if, you know, it's almost, you know, for example, is it inaccessible language that we're really just looking for people to help pick up the trash on the trails, right? There's no prerequisite needed for that. So. Sorry.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, we could always pose like you know, a couple other, like, you know, verbiage questions or open-ended questions on just like the about participation in general or something like that, whether it's board, committee, you know, watching meetings or anything like that, you know, trying to engage that type of thing. Think, you know, a lot
Well,
of
I
like,
could, Shanta, I mean, I would suggest, Richard, if you want to, I would write up sample question for us and maybe we can consider it. That would be a good idea, actually. What do you think, guys? Do you think that's a good idea? I mean, it looks like we've provided the space there for additional governance questions, so that makes some sense. That
Yeah, and some
and
of this
the board
stuff,
may want to go in a different direction, of course, but we can just make recommendations.
you know, a lot of like these questions on number 8 are like to gain year after year data, you know, but asking some sort of open-ended question or, you know, some sort of thing, you know, wouldn't be a bad idea.
And it seems like what's popping in my head is something, you know, asking some sort of question about are there obstacles to participating in, you know, Sudden Valley committees and boards and stuff, because that seems like that, you know, very much seems like a realistic thing that we're facing is that I don't think it's a lack of interest. I think there's all different obstacles that keep people from participating, whether it's, you know, I mean, you can name them, but yeah, I feel like there's times when we lose more committee members and volunteers and valued people and strengths than we gain, and we're always kind of trying to fill positions.
Yeah, and every committee is still a little different too. You know.
But I mean, I think, you know, myself, I even think the method of volunteering, the form that you fill out is still the most confusing thing in the world, because you have to kind of hack it too. You have to kind of make it your own form to like do it. Maybe that's the way they weed out who really wants to volunteer. But I mean, it's, you know, the first time you look at it, it's like, well, I think they're wanting me to, like, I'm volunteering for like the 4th of July event or something. I mean, and maybe I haven't looked at it more, you know, recently, but it seems like every year I'm like, oh yeah, that's right, this one's a little goofy. And maybe just the way we look at, you know, volunteers, because I think there's a lot of people that do want to, you know, volunteer to just do fun stuff, or do like a work on a trail committee or work on a trail project. I mean, or, you know, meaning, you know, do labor type stuff, or like what Richard was saying, pick up trash, but they don't want to go to, you know, 8 Parks and Trails committee meetings a year and do all that. They just want to be ready when it's like, okay, we have a shovel ready project, and who's our workers. And if, you know, if we do have that kind of people standing around, we should figure out a way somehow to engage them and utilize them, because otherwise we're just, you know, we're wasting resources that we could, you know, use that I think benefit the community in many ways.
Yeah, I think
I'd phrase that into a question. So what boundaries, you know, are there any boundaries you see to volunteering on committees and boards?
Yeah, something as like for number 10, like you said, what obstacles or issues or something like that do you see to participating in these various different aspects? And then, I think, because that's kind of where we got questions to be able to like put in here, like a couple questions like that. You know, these questions are largely for year over year data, so we don't want to be, you know, adjusting them really. Same with kind of this, these questions as well. You know, and then we have our like kind of planning questions, and our demographic questions kind of stay the same. We could always expand on the demographic questions if we wanted to. I think last year was, you know, kind of trying to gather as much information as possible without trying to dive too far down the privacy, you know, or intrusion of people's privacy or whatever.
And is census data available yet?
I think the 2020 stuff is supposed to come available like right about now. Last time I looked, I couldn't and this was like a couple months ago. I couldn't pull up all the 2020 stuff quite yet. I think it was like the end of September, so it might be available now.
That just definitely is going to be interesting to see.
Okay, so we got trying to reword the density reduction question to better articulate what density reduction actually is instead of referring to an old program that many people may not know what it is. The only other solution I could have would be you'd have to like put some sort of like message with it that explained what density reduction was as well. So we can look at rewording that question, and then I think we are all pretty good on the ice barn question.
Yeah.
And then I don't know if anyone else has any other, specific ideas where we could put them in the list as opposed to just getting a bunch more others. We can always add another idea of what that space could be utilized for.
Yeah, I have a possible suggestion. I don't know how realistic it is, but for the trails and stuff or improvements, things with the ice barn, etc. And if there were somehow it was possible to incorporate a CCC type summer program for interested high school students and beyond to get them involved, it would give them, it could get kind of complicated with different contractors if they're not willing to participate. But these things would be useful for experience with on the job work and vocational skills, etc., for those students or people of that age or whatever. But I don't know if that's just too off the wall. People have been talking about this for a long time for a national program, service program for something like the Peace Corps, but even for the CCC and the so-called Build Back Better, blah 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 blah. Anyway,
I know that some of the trails have been built by the Boy Scout. There was an Eagle Scout project, I think. One of the trails in Gate 5, I believe, was a project like that. Not a CCC project, but an Eagle Scout project or something. And yeah, that'd be great to enlist some help. For sure.
yeah, it's just something to think about, and I'm not certain how realistic it is because it might become a morass with interfacing that with contractors, who have, there are legal issues, safety issues, and so on and so forth that need to be thought through too.
Are you talking about an internship program or something like that?
Yeah, something like the CCC where people would, for the summer, in the summer months when there's no school, gives this the students something to do. It's something in their community. It also would potentially provide them with some skills, vocational trade skills, or who knows? I mean, if people wanted to put in a mini golf thing in the ice barn, that needs to be built, etc. I don't know to what level commercial contractors would be willing to put up with having interested high schoolers working on the project together with them, and maybe would require having some kind of program person to oversee this or some personnel. So there's some additional expense, but it all depends on the interest and the merits of and the sanity of doing that. But it was very useful in the Great Depression for people. But a lot of good things came out of that, and it would be possible an inspiration if it flew for other communities to consider doing something similar.
I'm always a fan of seeing, volunteer groups come together and pulling off great projects, because I think that, a lot of the coolest things that get done that way.
It builds an interaction within the community, so that strengthens the bonds in that regard. If people have some skin in the game for this, I built this trail, whatever, they're that pride and whatever connection to the area just engenders stronger sentiments about the community as a whole.
I think a lot of it's managing, whatever the projects are, they're just managed correctly, that, whatever labor needs to be done by volunteers is separated, and obviously, volunteers aren't running bulldozers and or, that's that sort of thing. I see it a lot of with the shoreline restoration projects I do, where they, they'll come in and they'll do all the work. They'll take out the armor and put down the beach nourishment, and then the planning comes back, and actually it's the conservation corps usually come in with some of the organizations I work with.
All the logistics and what's possible has to be worked out, and some professional contractors may not want to deal with all that extra baggage and so on.
Yeah, a lot of times you kind of wait till the contractors are gone and like, okay, your job's done, now we're doing the planting, or we're doing the.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so to whatever extent that it can make it realistic or feasible, then that's so much the better, if there's a solution in that regard.
Well, we might even be able to get somehow bring in the WMBC, is that the right acronym, AJ? Perhaps to help us with some trail building and such. Maybe if we can entice them to do that somehow.
Yeah, I think making sure we, what we do get planned, we meet, obviously every trail is a little bit different, but like the connected trail system needs to meet like a certain, code, or have a certain standard to it, like an interurban type trail, whereas like a hiking trail, isn't always held to those same type of standards and stuff like that. Whatever we do build, we have to make sure we can maintain moving forward. That's obviously always been an issue out here in the valley, from the original developers. Let's build all this stuff and then not maintain it over the lifetime. And we see, campgrounds and airports and skating rinks and stuff all just go away. So I think that's important aspect to keep in mind too.
Right.
But I think, so adding a question into governance about what sort of barriers or obstacles people are seeing, to be able to participate and stuff like that, and see if we can, we can draft up a question that frames like that kind of thought process, and then try to reframe the density reduction question to better articulate what that actually means. And then, take a look at the trail question, and do we want to, maybe we need to better elaborate what a connected trail system means in this aspect, like, describing it as like an interurban type connected trail or something like that, so people can better wrap their head around what that actually means, because a connected trail system could mean a lot of things to every different person, really. So making sure we kind of elaborate on what that would look like a bit, so that they could, better understand if they'd want something that includes multi-use or not. Otherwise, was there any other like facility type questions or amenity type questions that am I missing anything from our discussion?
Just one comment is that the where there's infrastructure and facilities, it makes sense that the trails are multi-purpose and for wider use. And the other aspect of that is whether they need some of those trails. Do they need to be wheelchair accessible, or the ADA? Is there some dispensation with the ADA with that? I don't know any of those answers, but some people may want to go from the swimming pool down to the marina for some reason or something, and need access via wheelchair for reasons. And on the other hand, where trails up the side of Lookout Mountain are 25% slope or something, nobody in their right mind is going to be dragging people up there on a wheelchair. I would hope. It's just too dangerous. So their usage, multi usage, isn't such a large concern of as far as the diversity of users.
Yeah, I think it would be, and that's something the engineering firm could, that gets selected could help us plan out where we can meet ADA requirements. We certainly should strive for that, I think.
Yeah.
Being as hilly as it is, it may not be possible everywhere, but
absolutely
where we can.
There's a trail some Sudden Valley official made behind our house. It's like a 60% grade.
Yeah.
Definitely not ADA compliant.
Yeah, well,
it's very easy to have,
Nobody really knows who made it, but
compliant trails or ADA compliant trails, kind of in the more intense areas too, like the community
there's
centers.
There's a deer trail behind my house. It's too scary to go down.
I love that trail, Steve.
Yeah.
If that's the trail that I'm thinking of at the top of Loganberry, actually.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It connects actually with Repeater Road, and so it's
Oh,
a very
okay,
nice
yeah.
little loop there. It's a nice
Wow.
running loop.
Yeah, well,
It is steep though. Yeah, it's not.
It is. It's pretty amazing.
Well, in some of these cases, I think the trails could be made a little more accessible. So, for instance, the trail behind my house was just improperly made, and it just needs to have switchbacks. It's a simple fix, but
Yep.
Yeah, and I think
a lot of our trails are kind of glorified social trails that have just been used a lot and stuff. And you can definitely tell the ones that were maybe real, intensive right of ways, or I think some of them were old roads even. But I think accessibility of all of them is probably something that needs to be looked at and obviously maintained. Because
yeah, for sure. This one, there was a plaque and everything made, and it's just we just need to have some.
Which one's that? I'm curious.
It's right behind the house on Gooseberry. It's behind my house it's on Gooseberry that it goes down to area Y trail that goes up to gate 28, which is a great connector. It's a wonderful connector, but it's just super steep.
5, right?
Yeah, gate 5. But it's super steep at the beginning. It just needs to have a couple switchbacks. It would be much more accessible. It may also run over a property too, so
that
definitely needs to be looked at. Definitely needs to be looked at.
There's a bit of a story back behind that one, and wondering how it went from an idea to actually, it's like, well, there's a trail there.
Good idea, but it just needs to be
something to connect through. But if it's going over property lines, then that's definitely something that's got to be.
It just seems like it might. I'm not certain of that, but it seems like it might. But yeah. Yeah, we have inquired as to maybe who how that came to be, but we haven't received any answers. But anyway,
I
that's
think
another.
Maddie was the gal in charge during, but it was because it was discussed at one time, it would be good to get access from the neighborhood up there through one of the open spaces there, but then the planning. And then, I think Ann's mentioned that Maddie wasn't even working, but I think that Maddie set the plan in motion and it was executed under Sam. But that's the big question is the Trails Committee actually, which I'm on or was not really quite sure what's going on with that, had gone on a site visit along that trail, along the main trail, the lower one, and and that's the problem. Sam knew nothing about it, but maintenance did, apparently. So, because it wasn't done by the Trails Committee, though, is I guess is what I'm getting at. It was kind of like, oh wait, what's this trail? We walked up and down it, and we're like, well, okay,
It's
where
one
did
thing we
this,
can
this
do.
come from? And we still haven't gotten an answer. From
I guess it's a really good idea to bring in an engineering company and so that we can get this stuff firmed up. So so that we can make sure our trails are legitimate, right? And we have a good trail system that works for folks, as many people as possible. Yeah, for sure.
But and I think now probably the maintenance people that would have done it are probably gone as well. Because I can't remember if Jacob said that they had gotten, again, it was kind of one of those ones we asked questions that went around. Because I'd love to know why.
Yeah, we've asked and haven't received answers, so we'd like to find out as well. So.
Yeah, I'm not really sure on that one. I think just kind of highlights the fact of planning this stuff and, is a good way to develop a system that it works and is sustainable into the future and is maintainable as well. All right. Does anyone have any other thoughts on the survey? All right, well, we can work on kind of restructuring a couple of those questions, particularly that density reduction one, and seeing how we can word that one to better articulate what that actually means so people have a better understanding if they're new here or haven't spent any time looking at stuff from the past.
All right. Do we want to move on from the survey then and move to the next item of business, which is our community plan?
I'm good with that.
All right.
Think pull up this real quick. So Mike had started to put some stuff together regarding land use. He's been itching to get moving on that element of the plan. But these were kind of the plan elements that we adopted as part of, they basically coincide with the Whatcom County Comprehensive Plan. And just to kind of reiterate, the Sun Valley bylaws for our committee dictate these are the things our plan is supposed to house. And so last year we had set in motion, following the format of the Whatcom County Comprehensive Plan to address all of these various things through these plan elements, which coordinate with that plan. And part of the thought process with that was, we obviously have to coordinate with Whatcom County and other jurisdictions. And so having, putting together our plan to be similar to that of Whatcom County's will allow better coordination between the two plans. And so, I think you can kind of see the overlap here. You know, you have facilities and infrastructure, community development, associated services, parks and rec. They're, you know, a lot of it's very similar here. And there's actually a few more additional things that the comprehensive plan format for Whatcom County follows. You know, I think not all these things need to be focused on immediately. Some are obviously more important than others, and some are just, you know, like utilities, for example, is probably just going to be a lot of pulling data from the utilities to better understand what we have here, where it's located, those types of things. You know, there's not, you know, it's not as elaborate of a section, community development or transportation, you know, or our facilities or things like that, where we're constantly creating plans and trying to put them in motion and trying to budget them appropriately and making sure we have, you know, funding for what we put together. You know, if we're going to make capital improvements, do we have the operating funds to maintain those things moving forward, that type of thing. I think the big thing at this point is to really start to determine who wants to kind of work on these various elements. You know, Devolio's obviously expressed an interest in the land use planning as a land use planner himself in his career. I think that's a good fit. You know, and just trying to put together kind of small groups to work on kind of compiling data from various outside organizations or internal documents, and putting together, starting to, you know, the big thing is data collection initially, and then it's start to kind of draft the verbiage of these things, and then, you know, as you saw in Mike's thing, starting to set like kind of policies or action items, you know, related to each of these sections and stuff like that. You know, we established the planning task force for the committee last year as kind of a, you know, a small group that kind of just helps coordinate all the various pieces and bring it all together, compile documents, you know, proofreading, editing, things like that. You know, we probably want to have, you know, kind of a small group that helps pull all these things together and help support, you know, anyone in the efforts of putting together these plans. You know, I'll say for myself and my own expertise, like I kind of look at the facilities and the transportation section is, you know, somewhere where I'd want to be focusing efforts and things like that. I know Sonia had told me prior to the meeting today that she was interested in the community development and the kind of economic development and stuff like that. You know, just to kind of go down here, these kind of outline like kind of what some of the various sections were, and I'd sent this out to you guys, and we put this together last year as kind of a starting point, you know, but these kind of outline what the purpose of each of these sections are and that type of thing. You know, for me, like the facilities and transportation is kind of setting goals and building plans for capital planning, and, you know, my engineering brain and stuff tailors more towards those types of things, but everybody's got a different way their brain functions or different interests and things like that. So if we could start to put together some, you know, small groups of people that can collaborate and coordinate on kind of putting some of this stuff together so that we can bring it back to our whole group and start to, you know, vet these various pieces, get more input, make some changes, do some edits, you know, and get something finalized. It would be great to kind of spend the next, you know, 2 or 3 months really getting some work done on these various sections so that, at the beginning of next year, I think our bylaws say in like, I remember it's like January or something that the long range planning is supposed to present like the long range plan to the board. And kind of once we get all these things in place, and get all the wording and stuff put together, then it creates a much easier, year after year, we'll be able to just kind of review, evaluate, how do we do in implementing various, goals that we set or priorities we set, and then adjusting, and then, basically the bylaws outline like a 3-year review cycle where we do a major review every 3 years with kind of minor reviews on how well did we implement what we put together, over in between those 3-year periods. So when we get the first version of this put together, then we would be looking at 3 years out when we would do another major review, and everything like that. So. Does anybody, obviously this stuff is a little bit more, it's, I guess, where's people's comfort level stand on like putting together some of this stuff? I know Mike just kind of sent over his like kind of a real rough draft of the land use section or whatever. That can kind of give people an idea of where or what we need to put together. Looking at the Whatcom County Comprehensive Plan can really help, wrap your head around kind of what these are. They're actually not like a ton of writing. A lot of it is like document compilation, maps, or, like for transportation or something, you'd have maps of where all the roads are, you'd have capital planning that goes into transportation facilities, or, same thing goes with like our facilities, and that type of thing. Parks and Rec, we have like master plans, that we have put together for like parks, and then for trails, like compiling all these various documents is kind of the initial point, and then drafting up some of the language that goes with it, and then it's really mostly about kind of setting goals and priorities, or certain policies that we may want to try to implement, things like that.
Well, I would be interested in non-dues revenue. That's an area that is new. That's the first time I've seen that one. Where would it be under?
I think that probably falls under your community development, economic development. That's where we kind of envision this non-dues revenue section from the bylaws being implemented into our plan. How do we economic development, how do we generate more revenue without having to increase dues so we can benefit our community without having to burden the membership, and stuff like that.
Okay.
Great, Lori. Thanks.
So maybe, Sonia was interested in that same aspect as well. So maybe you and Sonia could work together on community development and economic development.
Sure.
Great. And then you say Mike was involved in facilities and transportation. Is that what he's doing? Or is that
He's this land use one kind of
just
up
the whole
at the
thing?
top. It kind of filtered. Land use is like the first chapter usually of these comprehensive plans, and it's really if you don't know what you can use all your various spaces and land and properties and stuff for, then it's hard to really gauge like Parks and Rec, like where do we have all the green spaces?
Right.
So they need to know all that stuff. You need to have all those. Land use is a lot of like maps and various things like that go with it, to better, and it helps kind of inform and trickle down. That's why it's kind of across the top. It trickles down into kind of helps inform all the rest of us on some of this stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I could see taking the, because we do have, just from, thinking of the Parks and Trails Committee, there already is in existence a Parks and Trails Master Plan. That's actually what I was thinking Maddie originally started putting together, that details every single park and green space that we know of in Sudden Valley, and has a bit written about it. And
Adam, is that available? Do you
it is.
have
It
access
should be on
to
the.
that?
It should be on the internet.
Okay, it's
on the webpage.
I
There
think
should be
I've
Parks
seen
and
it.
I think it's
Trails.
under resident resources.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, great.
It's like every helpful document that you
Yeah.
can imagine. It's kind of inconveniently buried, and if you try to access it through your phone,
Awesome.
you're out of luck.
Yeah,
Josh and the communications committee are working on some improvements to the website to hopefully implement over the next year to just kind of reorganize some things and better, more easily direct people to various things like that.
so Adam, do you want to work in that category? Is that what you're saying then?
Yeah. That's, I think, kind of the natural, where I would naturally fall.
Great. What are you two thinking, Richard and Steve? Do you guys have any preferences?
For me, it'd probably be either some sort of community development, engagement, or the housing
Okay.
in those areas.
Since we have two in community development with Lori and Sonia, would you like to take up housing? Is that?
Yeah, let's take a stab at it. Why not?
Thank you. Thanks, Richard.
Yeah, and people can obviously work on more than one area too. We want people to work on things that they're passionate about, and that obviously increases participation and motivation. So, you can definitely work on both, Richard.
Yeah, we do our best work when our hearts are engaged. So I tell
That's right.
students, yeah, no, sure. However I can best assist.
And AJ, I'm just sort of envisioning the two of us filling in where needed, right? I think that might be, and I mean, I know your expertise is in transportation, right? And
Yeah, I'm kind of in these two facilities, transportation. I'd be fine working on both those. I think to some extent, like the utilities, and if we identify any other plan elements as cats are making a mess of the Legos.
that was that noise that
Yeah, spilling the Legos.
our youngest used to wake us up with that noise every day.
Sorry.
He would wake up early with the Legos.
Got a cough.
I would be happy to work on Parks and Rec and Environment too, Adam. That'd be good.
Great.
To do that aspect. And Steve, what are you thinking? Are you?
Yeah, well, I mean, this stuff is kind of far afield from what I'm used to doing, but the utilities stuff has some overlap, I guess.
There's a lot of physics in utilities, isn't there?
Right. Electrical or something, and I'm not an expert in, I know about electrical power and so on and so forth. I don't know to what extent you want to broaden that out to telecommunications and broadband stuff and cable and whatnot, document all of that. And I mean, the water and sewer stuff, of course.
Yeah, I think the utility one is kind of gets overlooked a bit, but it is, they cut up our roads, they provide good services that we all want,
Right.
There's a lot to them, and
Yeah.
they're not really controlled by us necessarily.
Right.
They're controlled by an outside entity. So it's good to have good policies in place so that, staff and management can can make sure we're getting those services as they're needed
Right.
for the community, but not, doing any damage to the community in the process.
Right. And climate change and so on, and, more frequent storms and wind damage and taking down power lines and, things like that. Heat domes where the power goes down because the wires can't, they're so hot they can't operate. I don't know. There are things like that. Maybe, I don't know if we
Wind
are
issues too.
near those limits ourselves, but the falling trees is certainly an issue, and it's there's a lot of trees on the drive out on Lake Louise Road. I see that look iffy. Wish they were more effort was put in on taking those.
A lot of that is county too, isn't it, AJ? The
Yeah.
Lake Louise roads.
Probably.
I know that at least some of that is.
Yeah, they don't seem
Yeah.
to be too. There's some trimming that is being done. You can see, but then there's others that trees that look pretty precarious along the way, and trees that have come down with their remnants crushed across the road. So it gives you an eerie feeling if you're at the wrong place at the wrong time driving those roads. Some of the trees have a pretty good lean because they're on a pretty good slope. So I'm happy to take a stab at that. It would be I'd be happy to have somebody to work with to keep me from going off. I will look at the Lake Whatcom document too, if to the extent that they've discussed that as well. See what's in that, but
I think we could all pitch in as well, Steve. Like
Yeah.
like AJ said, we can all work on more than
Okay.
one,
All
and yeah, for sure.
yeah,
Yeah, I'd be willing to pitch in on the utilities stuff.
Okay.
That kind of goes
Great.
hand in hand with my civil engineering background. And
good.
the transportation section is gonna be, like if you read that section and what, in the verbiage down below, a lot of it is gonna come from our, capital planning documents that, our engineering firm helps put together on, putting together a proper plan to fix the roads that need to be rebuilt and putting pavement preservation program in place for everything so that the roads don't deteriorate to the condition that some of them have been allowed to deteriorate to. Kind of
Okay.
thinking of all those steep roads connecting Harborview and Sun Valley Drive and Gate 3 that are just unraveling as we speak. So yeah, I'd be willing to work on the utilities one with you.
Okay, great. So
I'm trying to make a list here.
I was doing the same on my notepad on my phone, AJ. So if there are any holes in your list, I have a list.
Okay.
what's the time scale for getting stuff done in the next couple of weeks, or?
I think it'd be good to start to formulate like some of the documents may take us a second to for pulling documents from outside agencies, which like utilities in particular, we may have to go to some of these utility companies and be like, where do you got, mains, and where do you got service lines, and, where are you guys located, and getting some of like those type of documents to better inform, our, what we put together and stuff. So,
Right.
I think the goal at this point is, over the next 3 months or so, trying to, build as many of these sections out as we can.
Okay.
you know, and if there's documents that are needed, you know, from Sudden Valley and stuff, you know, you can direct things my way and I can help track down like those types of documents with our staff, or myself, and, you know, get any sort of records we need in that regard. Some of the outside agency stuff may, you know, take longer because we're at the mercy of their timelines and stuff, and hopefully they'll work with us on all that type of stuff. I think I'm not sure if I'm missing anything, but this is what I got so far. Missing, what am I? Housing. That's
AJ, did you provide us with a plan? I think the documents that you had attached, there was a community plan attached to that, right? Is that we could go look at and use as a model, or?
I did what I sent for this meeting. No, I had included our guidebook from strategic planning, which kind of outlined, you know, how the various planning processes work in conjunction with one another, as just kind of a reminder to everyone. And then the document with the elements and kind of explaining what those elements are looking into. I think that's a good, you know, it's just the SV comp community plan elements, and there's a description in there on each of those that kind of outlines, you know, what sort of things we need to be looking for as far as documentation go, and like, you know, what we need to build out. I would recommend going to the Whatcom County website and looking at the Whatcom County Comprehensive Plan as kind of a guide for each of these sections that'll better inform, you know, what exactly we're looking for. You can see what sort of policies and goals that they tried to establish in theirs, you know, and then you take those thought processes and pivot them over to our neighborhood in Sun Valley, and then how do we go about, you know, formulating that for our own neighborhood, because, you know, Whatcom County is obviously a much bigger and diverse area, you know, from farmlands to quarries to mountains and all that type of stuff. And, you know, they got more going on, and there's a larger planning, you know, effort that goes into that, but it'll help us kind of tailor things down to Sudden Valley's level. I'm missing anything at this point?
I just popped into that site and it is pretty clear. It should provide a nice guidepost for us for sure.
Yeah, and then I think, you know, you can kind of look at what DeVolio had sent over, and, you know, his kind of shows some of the formatting and stuff, and, you know, piggybacks off of that Whatcom County comp plan.
So AJ and I'll do we want to maybe come back with next meeting with the drafts at the end of the month, or is that a possibility, or is that something that or the following meeting in November perhaps?
I think targeting the November meeting for some drafts of the sections, you know, I think we can start to kind of, you know, as certain people, I think for the next meeting and at the end of this month, it'd be good to, you know, start to pull the various, you know, documents that we need to pull together. Like, for example, like if we're pulling for, let's just look at housing, for example. The purpose of the housing element is to consider existing housing patterns, projected population growth, you know, build out scenarios, in order to address community needs and desires in realistic ways. The housing element should not only focus on potential build out, but weigh the costs of additional services with any increase in revenues and impact on home values and residents' quality of life. So we're going to have to, for like that element, we're going to have to start to look at like, what is the build out scenario? If every vacant lot that's currently able to be developed gets developed, what does that look like? And how does that affect the services we currently have? How much more population growth could we expect to see from something like that? Part of the density reduction question, could end up being like a policy question, or a policy type thing in the housing, or a priority or a goal or something to address, if build out, it looks this way, does it look favorable to, do density reduction further than what we've already done so far, and those types of things, or like the facility section, providing adequate facilities and services for residents within the association's financial capabilities, and providing a framework for planning for these facilities, establishing level of service that we want to have for each of these facilities, so we're going to have to be pulling our, capital improvement plans and things like that. And the same thing kind of goes with the transportation section too, goes hand in hand a bit with facilities, pulling those. Obviously the board's planning on getting a new level 1 reserve study that, better outlines exactly what all of our maintenance obligations for each of our buildings to maintain them moving forward in perpetuity, as opposed to just programming new buildings all the time. So, we'll be pulling some of like those documents together and things like that. And then, formulating the sections, and then working to, set those goals and priorities or recommended policies that could be enacted to achieve those goals and things like that. That kind of makes sense. I don't know. I'm no expert on all of this either myself, but I think a lot of it's trying to initially formulate what all is the information that we need to compile for our section. Start to compile that. As you start to do that, looking at the Whatcom County Comprehensive Plan and, and then determining, do we need any more documentation or do we need to do some research? Is there the possibility we maybe need to spend some money on something to get better information or more information on something? Do we need to go to outside entities to find information? Things like that. So kind of by next meeting, having kind of a comprehensive list of, if you have documentation requests for Sudden Valley documents, I can start to help on that. If we have documentation needs from outside agencies, whether that's like DNR, State of Washington, Whatcom County, those types of things. And then trying to, once we have all that documentation together over the next few weeks, then we can start kind of drafting up the wording elements and then starting to put some of our, goals and priorities on paper to go with that stuff, and then vetting it through the whole committee here at the November meeting. I feel like I'm rambling a bit now.
Sounds good. It's a plan.
We
Richard, I can probably help you with housing too, so might as well take on another.
Love it.
All right.
I think, Sonia was a part of the planning. I think me, Brian, and Sonia were on the planning task force last time. We can try to put together a timeline here over the next week or so, and try to better outline what our target dates and goals are for compiling this stuff. That I think that would probably help quite a bit, and then we can spend some time this next week taking a look at the comprehensive plan for Whatcom County and the various sections that you guys are interested in, and get a better handle on what you need to put together, and then we can communicate via email amongst our smaller groups of people, and start to kind of establish some working plans within our little groups on who's going to kind of tackle various items and things like that. That makes sense, but we're pushing 2 hours here now, so getting to be about my bedtime. This is where I start to crash.
All right, we're ready to move on then to, I believe, any new business. I don't think there's anything new that we're working with right now, so I think we go to property owner comments. John, thanks for hanging in with us.
Yeah, no problem.
You only have one property owner right now.
Yes. And I think you're probably pretty familiar with who that is.
I think I am, yeah.
If he wants to join in here, she can just use the raise hand feature in Zoom. But she had a couple comments along the way there, and perhaps that's all we've got for tonight.
Right, thanks, John.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Motion to adjourn. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second, Adam. All right, excellent.